Salam everyone. So in this lecture, I'm going to talk about a question that was raised, which is, how did Abraham take Shahada in the Quran? The Quran states that Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he was one inclining towards the truth, a Muslim, implying that he was submitting to one God, and he was not one of the polytheists. So we'll analyze the question, the concept of Shahada according to the Quran, and more importantly, answering the question, how did Abraham take Shahada, and the meaning of the word Shahada, and what about the rest of the prophets that came after Abraham? They were also Muslims. How did they take Shahada? So first we'll take a look at the concept of Shahada that we actually practice today. So for example, if someone needs to convert into a Muslim, for example, they would have to say some words, right? So we'll take a look at what those are and how we actually become Muslim, and then the process that follows. Here's the word Shahada, and I've used the encyclopedia, Wikipedia. The Shahada Arabic word means testimony, which is an Islamic creed, right? So it's a system and one of the 5 pillars of Islam, which means, and this is one of the first pillar being derived, declaring beliefs in oneness of God and the acceptance of Muhammad as God's prophet. The declaration in its shortest form reads, right to left in Arabic, La ilaha illallahu Muhammadur Rasulullah. There is no God but God. Muhammad is the messenger of God. And there are other versions of Shahada as well. For example, we say Ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, and so on. But this is the basic form of the Shahada. Now, one would imagine that this is some type of a verse in the Quran where we actually recite to become a Muslim. It's actually not. It's not found in the Quran. And that begs the question, if it's not in the actual Quran, which is the holy book, how do we actually use this? Where does this come from? And of course, I'll answer it later on once we actually dig deeper into where this came from, the origin of this particular sentence in the Arabic language. And then, of course, answering the big question, how did Abraham took this Shahada? What did Abraham has to say? Of course, Abraham could not have said, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, right? Because he came before this prophet. So here's the Shahada origin according to, again, the encyclopedia, Wikipedia. So there are 2 phrases of the Shahada that are both present in the Quran. For example, in chapter 37 or Surah 37, verse 35, and then chapter 48 or Surah 48, verse 29. And they're not found there side by side. So it's not a complete sentence because they occur, different words occur in different verses. However, that's the Shahada formula. Versions of both phrases began to appear in coins and monumental architecture in the late 7th century, which suggests that it had not been officially established as a ritual statement of faith until then. So what this is implying is that this phrase, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, actually did not appear until the 7th century in the form of coins, and that's the evidence that we actually have today, where we can take a look at those coins relating to those 7th century coins, for instance, and then we can take a look at what's written on them, and that's what we find. Another area is the inscription in the Dome of the Rock, established in 692 in Jerusalem, reads, There is no God but God alone. He has no partner with him, and Muhammad is the messenger of God. Another variant appears in coins minted after the reign of Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, the 5th Umayyad Caliph, in the form, Muhammad is a servant of God and his messenger. Although it is not clear when the Shahada first came into common use among Muslims, it is clear that the sentiments it expresses were part of the Quran and Islamic doctrine from the earliest periods. Here are the verses that we just talked about. Verse 37 and 35 says, إِنَّهُمْ كَانُوا إِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهُ يَسْتَكْبِرُونَ. So here you can see the first part of the Shahada, right? Where it says, La ilaha illallah. So it's basically taken from this verse, a part of this verse. And then I'm going to click on the next slide. You are going to see Muhammadur Rasulullah, which is the other half of the Shahada. So once again, chapter 37, verse 35. We took the part of it, which says La ilaha illallah. And then next is Muhammadur Rasulullah, which is the first part of this verse, which is chapter 48, verse 29, where it says Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. And the verse continues on as well. So the basic Shahada actually is from two different verses belonging to two different chapters or surahs in the Quran. And of course, keep in mind that our main question is, how did Abraham took Shahada when he became a Muslim, or the Quran says that he is a Muslim. So we'll take a look at what a Muslim is as well as we move along. The word Muhammad, I've also highlighted just for your own consumption, only occurs in the Quran 4 times in various surahs, and I've listed them here. You can refer to these as well. So the word Shahada in the Quran occurs, the triliteral root Sheen, Ha, Da, occurs 160 times in the Quran in 9 derived forms. Now, if you're a student of Arabic grammar, perfect, you would understand. But if not, that's okay. I've just provided this reference so that we just understand how many times this actually word Shahada, which means to testify, occurs in the Quran itself. So it's 44 times as the form 1 verb, 7 times as the form 4 verb, and these are just different forms of verb in the Arabic language. Twice as the form 10 verb, 3 times as a noun, 23 times as the noun shahadat, and then 56 times as the nominal, once as a noun mashhad, 21 times as the active participle, and then 3 times as the passive participle. And once again, this is just for your consumption. All right, here's the answer to the question how Abraham submitted. So according to the Quran in chapter 2 verse 131, which is Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, "Is qala lahu rabbuhu aslim qala aslamtu li rabbil alamin." So when his Lord said to him, Abraham, submit, he said, I have submitted to the Lord of the worlds. So it's really just a simple statement. God asked Abraham, submit. He said, I have submitted. And then verse 132, same chapter below, Abraham instructed his sons to do exactly the same, to submit. And so did Jacob, saying, O my sons, indeed Allah has chosen for you this religion, so do not die except while you are submitters, right? Or Muslims, Muslimun. So here we see that the Quran provides us the method of submission. And this is how Abraham submitted. And of course, Abraham could not have taken the standard Shahada that we actually use today if someone needs to become a Muslim or convert to a Muslim, or just say, I submit to the Lord of the mankind or Lord of the worlds. So how did this standard or Shahada became a Shahada itself? So why do we today say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah as part of our first pillar, so to speak, right? In order to become a Muslim. Why can't we just follow the Abraham tradition? Because we are also aware as student of the Quran that Prophet Muhammad was also instructed to follow the creed or the Millat Ibrahim Hanifa, right? The dictation of Ibrahim, which was being a monotheist, Hanif. So let's explore this further. How did this actually came into being? I did mention in the beginning, Wikipedia, the origin of the word Shahada, where it came from Abdul Malik in the 7th century on the coins, right? So let's take a look at, let's dig deeper slightly so that we actually provide some proof on actually how this actually came about. To do this, I've read this book called The Quran in Context, edited by Angelica Neuwirth, Nikolai Sinai, and Michael Marks. Fascinating book, excellent source. It'll walk us through the concept. Of course, it's about 900 pages. I'm not going to read the entire book, but I'm just going to highlight the chapter where it walks us through the coin imagery of how the development began within the 7th century. So I have this book in PDF. I can make this available. If you'd like to have this in PDF, just let me know. Post it in the comments area below. And I will place the link so you can actually download this book, or you can send me an email, contact me, and I'll send you this book as well. So once again, The Quran in Context, Historical and Literary Investigations into the Quranic Milieu, edited by Angelica Neuwirth. So I'm going to scroll down further. The Quran in Context, of course. Let's go down here. Here are the contents. So one of the chapters that I'm going to highlight in this particular lecture is that the evolving representation of the early Islamic empire and the religion on coin imagery. So I'm going to directly go to page 149. Let me make this bigger so you can actually see better. Perfect. There we go. So this chapter is something we are going to focus on, and I'm going to walk you through. What I've done is I'm not going to read of course, the entire chapter. It's about, I'd say about 50 pages or so. I'm just going to read the highlighted part that I've highlighted. So it's going to walk you through the concept of how this entire Shahada element came into being. And then, of course, we know exactly what the Quran stance is on Shahada and how Abraham, according to the Quran, says submit. Allah says submit, and he just submitted. But let's move further. So I'm going to navigate to 149. And the title of this particular chapter is The Evolving Representation of the Early Islamic Empire and Its Religion on Coin Imagery. So how did the theology of Islam and its idea of empire evolve based on the Hellenistic, Roman, Iranian foundation and in the face of Christianity, Judaism, Neoplatonism, and Zoroastrianism? Since the 70s, it has much been debated and has inspired skeptical polemics against what had until then been taken to constitute the established knowledge. Now, the extremely divergent points of view taken in this controversy at large are possible to maintain because there are few undisclosed or undisputed Arabic sources on the first decades of Islam. Before I move further, there is no expression for empire or state within medieval Islamic sources. Okay, so Dar es-Salam was used to refer to the territory of Islam as opposed to Dar al-Harb, which is the outside the jurisdiction. Early Islam obviously never needed an expression for empire, probably because it considered itself to be universal. And this is true because the Quran is a universal book for all mankind. It's not specifically for a particular group or Muslims, so to speak. It's for everyone. Moving forward, although there has been growing interest in sources from outside Arabic Islamic tradition, it was only in 1997 that Robert Hoyland undertook a systematic examination of parallel literary evidence from non-Muslim sources that predated the existing Arabic texts. So I'm just going to summarize this as we speak, right? So instead of reading the entire text. So the Abdul Malik reign as the most significant turning point of early Islamic history. And this is again 692. And keep in mind that our Prophet Muhammad died in 632. So this is about 50 years after, in other words, after the 4 caliphs have passed, right? Abdul Malik reign comes about in about 692. So in 2006, the writer Hoyland added new epigraphic material to the discussion and stressed the important role of Muawiyah played in this process. It is against the background that this imagery and text messages to be found on coins became more important than ever, as knowledge of early Islamic coinage has grown tremendously since the early 90s. And coins offer the only continuous and contemporary independent and primary source for the period of the genesis of the new religion and its empire from Spain to Central Asia. So frequently interpretations of Islamic coin imagery by students of political history or the history of art disregard the proper numismatic context of the 7th century. So this particular chapter would attempt to provide an overview of the development of the Islamic coin imagery, and this is going to provide us the evidence where the Shahada, or the terms, how they actually began to appear way after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So it's moving forward, scroll down. So the early phases from 636 to about 655 or 658. And note that we need to be aware that the Quran uses the word dinar in chapter 3, verse 75. This was the currency of the Roman Empire. So what this is implying is that in this particular area from 636, is about 5 years after the death of the Prophet, the coins, or the financial exchange being made using coins, were actually being used in dinar because it's referenced in the Quran itself, which means the dinar had to be present, or this form of currency had to be present at the time of Prophet Muhammad. So the Roman dinar, or the currency, did not have any inscription of the Shahada, or the words, or any Islamic, or any of the words from the Quran itself. In fact, they were using these Byzantine, or the Byzantine coins, which is the dinar. And you'll notice that in this particular figure, the Heraclius, the emperor, and Heraclius Constantine, which are 616 and 625, and this is at the time of the prophets when he was alive. These were the coins that were being used. Close this part. Let's scroll down. So as time passes, as we move forward, in the Sasanian Empire, the coinage of the physical cycle was the uniform silver dirham. So there are two things. There's dinar and there's dirham. And even today, countries like Kuwait uses dinar, and countries like, or UAE, United Arab Emirates, uses dirham. In the Sasanian Empire, which is the Persian Empire, the coinage was used as dirham that was struck during the reign of Khusru II from 590 to 591 to 628. In the first decades after the Battle of Yarmouk in 636, that is again after the death of the Prophet, and the establishment of Taurus border zone, Byzantine coppers remained in circulation in Syria, and probably until the reform of Abdul Malik, which is again 685 to 705, in 77 to 79, 696 to 699. And the Battle of Yarmouk is, once again, just a brief history. This Battle of Yarmouk was a major battle between the army of Byzantine Empire and the Muslim Arab forces of the Rashidun Caliphate. The battle consisted of a series of engagements that lasted for about 6 days in August 636 near the Yarmouk River along the borders of Syria and Jordan, east of the Sea of Galilee. And the result was a complete Muslim victory, which ended Byzantine rule in Syria. And this battle is regarded as one of the most decisive battles in military history and is marked as first great wave for early Muslim conquest after the death of Prophet Muhammad. So just a brief side note on the Battle of Yarmouk. So in the first decades after the Battle of Yarmouk, Byzantine copper remained in Syria, so the same coin was used even after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, which we have established. Moving forward, let me scroll down. So for these early decades, there is no contemporary evidence that the Arab Islamic leaders developed an imperial ideology of their own. So once again, after the death of the Prophet, and about 50 years later, there's no contemporary evidence that shows us coins that relate or that say something of an Islamic nature. The idea of having a universal empire is different from having a state with institutions and a governing body. So as leaders of the victorious Arab armies, inspired by the teachings of the new prophet, they were probably at first content with their de facto rule in the name of the new religion. So what's happening here is that as time is passing, right, as Arabs are spreading, or as the Muslims after the death of the Prophet are spreading into other countries, that's where the need for a state or for an institution is arising. And that's, of course, logical as things grow. So despite these successful conquests, the Arab Islamic elite may have thought that universal rule could only be achieved within the framework of the Roman Empire, with its capital at Constantinople, So what evidence would support such a hypothesis? Firstly, an idea of Rome was widespread and historically powerful. The Arab population and tribes in Bilad al-Sham and northern Mesopotamia, especially the Ghassani tribes, had been exposed to the idea of Rome for almost 800 years. In the 7th century, the Hunnish ruler in Central Asia called himself Caesar of Rome, and Peter Thoreau has even pointed the continuity of the idea of imperial Rome in the Ottoman ideology. Secondly, up to the early 3rd and 9th century, campaigns were undertaken to conquer Constantinople, which points to the importance attributed to that city. Frequent and large-scale attempts occurred in that period under the study until about the time of the uprising of the Caliph Abdullah bin Zubair in 680. And Abdullah bin Zubair was the grandson of Caliph Abu Bakr, which was the friend of Prophet Muhammad. Thirdly, al-Bukhari, which is way later, almost about 300 years, in 256 and 870, which is about 200 some years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, relates a hadith of the Prophet calling for the conquest of Rome, saying that until that had been accomplished, there would be no day of judgment. And this can be read to mean that the day of judgment will come after creation of a Roman universal empire of Islamic denomination. So let's move forward. We know from the reports on the Futuh that the Christian urban and parochial elite represented the cities when dealing with Islamic military tribal leaders, and they were the mainstay of early Umayyad civil administration. And again, the coin imagery continues as time passes. So I'm going to go down the next phase after importation and imitation can be assumed to begin in 660s to 670s during the reign of Muawiyah. It ends about 691 to 694, the years of the Marwanid reforms. So now we're looking at the Marwanid reforms and Abdullah bin Zubair being in the same time frame, which is again 50 years after the death of Prophet Muhammad. So more centralized policy in the state building within the Muawiyah regime, as it now becoming apparent from the inscriptions from these coin imagery, started to take place. The officially recognized regular mints were set up, and they were also named on the coins in Greek or Arabic. So validating expressions in both languages, such as tayyib, which means good, or jaiz means current, wafal ilallah, fulfillment to God, and so on. And sometimes the coin would also say Bismillah, in the name of God, were included in the design. This established Arabic as the language of the validating authority. So in the period of Muawiyah, the indigenous population probably retained a strong adherence to the traditional Christian symbols and may have shown a tendency to reject coins without crosses, because of course the Christians used crosses on their coins, as we saw in the imagery. You can relate to that. However, in the phases of Umayyad imperial image coins, when people had become used to them, we find more variety and different Byzantine models were copied. Moving forward, so here you notice the Heracles, right? The imagery and the coins but here what's changing in 660, 680 area is, or regime, or the era, an awareness of the cross as a symbol can be seen in a comparatively limited series of imitative gold coins, probably struck in Damascus, closely copying the nomisma or of Heracles and his son Constantine. With slightly blundered Greek legends, the prominent cross on steps on figure 1 that we saw earlier in the beginning was transformed into a bar on a pole on steps. So this is now a bar on a pole of steps. So the cross is now changing its shape as time is passing during the Muawiyah regime, or the era. So let's scroll down. All right, moving forward to the Sassanid realm, right, the Persian. How did the currency and visual representation of power and religion develop in the newly conquered lands of Iraq and Iran? The centralized Sassanid Empire was attacked despite its devastation and chaos caused by the aftermath of Heraclius' victory. Its administration, its army based on cash payments, and its monetary economy were to a significant degree under the control by the center, in contrast to the declining Byzantine Empire. So even after the assassination of Khusru II in 628 and the almost complete annihilation of the army at the Battle of Nehawan in 641, institutions and the monetary economy remained intact. And here you can see the coins in the era of Khusru II, which is the dirhams. And keep in mind that you'll see the pictures of the king on these coins. And later on we'll see, as time passes in the Muawiyah regime, these images were being replaced on the picture of the coins, picture of kings on the coin were replaced by some other text. And we'll take a look at as I scroll down. So we're at page 162. I'm going to scroll down to 187, or I'm going to read until 187. That's where the chapter ends, okay? Just so you know where we are on the timeline. So from the 5th regnal year, 635 to 36 onward, the Yazgard III, which is the last Shahanshah, or the emperor of Persia, was in retreat. And his father, I believe, was Khusru al-Parvez. That was the father of Yazgard III. So in this 20th regnal year in 651, he was assassinated in Marv, the last eastern remnant of this empire. So these are the coins within the Yazgard III. These are the dirhams of that time. Let's scroll down, moving forward. So I'm going to move forward because that's the Yazgard imagery. And of course, the introduction of this new era in coins indicates that the administrative Arabic elite gradually developed an awareness of its Islamic identity. And this is again within the 690, 680, way after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So this is interesting. The word Bismillah is a general phrase without any specific Islamic content. Therefore, it is likely to be used here only as a mark of validation. Believers instead of believed that the use of Allah, God, in this phrase in the beginning of the Islamic propaganda predating the use of the name of Muhammad. Allah, however, is the God common to all contemporary religions in the Middle East. This assumption misled them to postulate that Khilafat Allah was the most important and programmatic title of the early caliphs. The epigraphic and the numismatic evidence proves, however, that the commander of the believer was the more important title, and that the invocation of the messengership of Muhammad was the first distinct Islamic slogan. This misconception of the role of Muhammad in the evolving propaganda and the title Khilafat Allah in the coin protocol gave their book a false start in argumentation. Let's scroll down. So the Christian Georgia had belonged to the Sassanid realm and was part of the circulation zone of the Sassanid theorem. A strong sense of religious identity is found here at about the same time as the immobilized year 20 YE theorems were being minted. And once again, we see the same concept as we move forward. The third and fourth phases in development of the coin design cover approximately the years 30 to 60 YE or 661 to 681 CE, the Sufyanid period up to the second fitna, which is the second civil war among Muslims themselves. There were two wars, the first civil war and then the second civil war after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. So here we're referring to the second civil war between 661 or 681. So let's scroll down. Let's move forward. So coins in the name of Muawiyah, as we saw earlier, his Arab title is written as Pahlawi. So Muawiyah is also in Arabic is Pahlawi script, and the second part translated into Persian as Amir of the believers, which is leader or ruler of the believers, stressing his role as leader of the Islamic elite. So some years after the first fitna, or the first civil war between 656 and 661, once again that's about 20 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the first civil war, in this period Umayyad governors began to affirm the rule with a reference to God in Arabic. The first was the governor of East, Zayd bin Sufyan. He promulgated regularly his authority with the legend Bismillah Rabbi, in the name of God my Lord. Other governors followed his example and added after Rabb their own name. For example, Bismillah Rabbil Hakam, in the name of God, the Lord of the Al-Hakam, who was Umayyad's governor of the Kirman province between 675 to 677. And once again, we see Abdullah bin Zubair as Amir of the believers in Pahlavi theorem. The second fitna, the second civil war, the Zubairid, Abdullah bin Zubair movement, or the Zubairid movement, and the Caliphate of Ibn az-Zubair between 681 and 693, and the much fiercer Kharijite challenge between 687 and 697 constitute the fifth phase in the movement towards the first inclusion of the Islamic symbols on coins, and they mark the watershed in the development towards a clear iconographic expression of the new religion and state. Abdullah bin Zubair was a close, venerated member of the family of the Prophet. Like I mentioned, he was the grandson of Caliph Abu Bakr and the son of Asma bint Abi Bakr. So Asma was the daughter of Abu Bakr and he was the son of Asma. And his father was Zubair ibn Awam. So Zubair emphasized the religious character of the caliphate and demanded a state in accordance with the principles of Islam, whatever this meant at that time. After Muawiyah's death in 680, Abdullah bin Zubair strongly opposed the Sufyanid claim for the caliphate and was supported in many parts of the empire. His policy and goals are only known indirectly through the anti-Umayyad historiography of the Abbasids. A study of the coins now available for this period enables us to write a more accurate history of his caliphate. So Abdullah bin Zubair's name first appeared on coins in Kirman in 681. After the death of Umayyad Caliph Yazid, the coins show that he assumed the imperial title Amir of the believers, or leader of the believers, or ruler of the believers. And 637, his brother Musab secured Basra, Iraq, and other territories in the to the east as far as the Sijistan. And here you'll notice the Abdullah bin Malik and Abdullah bin Amir or Zubair, the Zubair governor Dirham abbreviation located on the coins. And you'll also notice, if you can read Arabic, you'll see it says Bismillah and then Muhammadur Rasulullah. So there are two words separate, in the name of God, and then Muhammad is the prophet, is the messenger of God. So this is where the imagery of these two Shahada, or not really Shahada, part of this is Shahada. Bismillah is in the name of God yet, and then Muhammadur Rasulullah is the one part of the Shahada that we actually currently take if someone needs to convert to a Muslim, which again is not from the Quran. It's only part verse of the Quran that we've established in the beginning. So as we move forward, same thing, you get to see La ilaha illallah and then Muhammadur Rasulullah. So between the years 685 to 688, the Zubayrid governor of the East placed the Arabic legend Muhammadur Rasulullah, Muhammad is the messenger of God, on the observed margin of the coins for the first time. So this is for the first time where the Muhammadur Rasulullah started to appear on the coin imagery. So coins were created with the legend Muhammad is the messenger of God in front of the portrait of the Shahanshah, which is the Persian Empire Yazgard III, right? That was a Shahanshah once he was defeated and the Arabs conquered Persia, right? They entered the Persian Empire. That's where the coin imagery at that time was being placed. So the profession of faith and the unity of God, the Shahada, and that's the word we were looking for, was placed in the Arabic on the observed margin, as we saw. Bismillah, la ilaha illallah, wahdahu, in the name of God, there is no deity other than God alone. In the same year, 689 to 90, an anonymous coin with the Pahlavi or the Muawiyah inscription, Muhammad is the messenger of God, Muhammadur Rasulullah, in the first place with the governor's name in front of the portrait, was struck in the Kirman province, and then probably under the Kharijite control. So the Zubayrites and the Kharijites thus propagated the new Islamic imperial rule with reference to the Prophet, and founder of the state unobserved, which is the usual side of the sovereign. So we now see that the coins are now being changed or minted with this new inscriptions on them. So moving forward, in the secondary literature, Shahada is sometimes defined and also to include the invocation of the messengership of Muhammad. Here the term denotes only the profession of the unity of God. Let's move forward. So just a quick note here. This is just a good part on Shahada development. So let's take a look at what this is. So in the year 691 to 692, the Zubayrid governor of the remote province of Sijistan in southeastern Iran, Abd al-Aziz and Abdullah bin Amir, brother of the aforementioned innovative governor of the East, went a step further by replacing the Zoroastrian fire altar and attendance with the profession of the new faith, Shahada. Very important. So Zoroastrian, of course, are fire worshippers, and they still exist. Many groups still exist in the world today. So Zoroastrians fire altar and attendance with the profession of the new faith, Shahada. The Iraj Mushiri has read the Pahlavi script thus: 72, no God but He, another God does not exist. Muhammad is the messenger of God. The Shahada appears here in Pahlavi script and in the Persian language, replacing the fire altar in the same way as the altar with the cross in Georgia it is the first known iconic symbol of the Islamic religion and its empire. The Zubairid governors had targeted the ideological and religious deficiencies of the Sufyanid Umayyad regime. The probable audience of these coins' ideological message was not only the new Arab military elite, but also the old Persian-speaking Zoroastrian elite that controlled the civil administration in the East. So in the provinces of the Kharijite control, the Islamic religious propaganda addressed in Arabic the crucial question of legitimate power, that is, who should guide the believers. La hukmu illallah. Guidance, judgment belongs only to God. And Bismillah waliyil amr. In the name of God, the master of authority. So in 691 to 692, the Marwanids reconquered Iraq, and in the next year, in 692, brutally suppressed the caliphate of Abdullah bin Zubair in Mecca. The ideologically much more aggressive Kharijite movement, though, still controlled much of Iran. So we'll see that the Marwanids, or the Muawiyah group, fought with the Zubair group in Mecca, which is the siege of Mecca in around 692 or so. Let's scroll down. So as we move forward, you'll see now that the Second Civil War, the conflicts between Muawiyah group and then the Zubair group, the siege of Mecca, will continue. So the reforms of the activities of Abdul Malik bin Marwan and the omnipotent governor of the East, Hajjaj bin Yusuf, who was the general at that time, within the Malik's regime, can be seen as one hand as an attempt to integrate the defeated modern Zubairid movement, and on the other hand, a forceful reaction to the ongoing and ideologically much more potent Kharijite challenge. So it was now the latest, if not before, that the idea of an Islamic universal empire in its own ideological right arose, and Mecca was too far away for a representative imperial religious cult to be successfully controlled. So Abdul Malik built the present Dome of Rock in Jerusalem. And remember, in the beginning of the lecture, the origins of the word Shahada also are inscribed within the Dome of the Rock. The choice of the Jerusalem placed the imperial state religion in the tradition of Judaism and Christianity, and in the center of the medieval world. So what's happening here is, based on the evidence coin imagery, and we follow the historical evidences, the concept of Islamic State, or the Islam, is becoming similar to Judaism and Christianity. So the elements of traditional coin design were reconsidered as well. So the designers of these coins had to balance two necessities. First, the traditional conservatism of precious metal coin design, and secondly, the need to create a symbolic rhetoric for both Islam and its empire. Between 692 and 696, the Marwanid government experimented with these new symbols and designs. So they started to create these new coins as we move along. So the recurring theme of all coins designs was the inclusion of the same formula, Muhammadur Rasulullah, that was being written on these coins. All right, let's move down. Let's scroll down further so you can actually see as we move along. And within 692, you notice the imagery now exists with the inscriptions. So same thing as we move along. Let me scroll down towards the end here a little bit. So the beginning of this series, the gold coinage followed the same course. And once again, we see that the inclusion of the Shahada on silver dirhams were included as time progressed. And you'll notice the altar, the steps, and the bar also reflects certain changes, and more towards the actual inscription of the Shahada, where it says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Okay, perfect. So we're almost nearing the end here. So between 693 and 696, the next ideologically more consistent and indeed more unified iconographic representation of the empire was created for Syria in gold, copper, and silver, as we see in figure 21 and 24. So right here is 24. So titles Amir al-Mu'mineen and Khalafat Allah dirham without the mint. And we can see here the inscriptions. So on the gold dinar, the caliph is surrounded by the Arabic Shahada and the invocation of the messengership of Muhammad. So here, notice, let me scroll up. You'll notice the Amir, or the leader, is encircled with the Shahada, where it says La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Perfect. Okay. So within 694, on the silver coins, the image of the Shahanshah, or the king, the leader, remained on the observe on the iconic mark of the dirham. And then we saw this, right? So let me progress forward. Same thing as we're moving forward on these evidence of the coins. The margin carries the Shahada, right? So the margin outside the coin itself in circular area carries a Shahada, and the reference to Muhammad had become the norm by now. So within these years, all coins minted started to say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, or of similar nature. So on either side of the arch are the imperial titles, as on the standing caliph dirham, the coin itself. The arch covers a lance or spear, and on the either side is the inscription Nasrullah, which means victory of God, or Nasrullah, may God give assistance. And importantly, you'll notice that the prayer niches, or called the mihrab, within the mosques themselves, or art historical reasons, instead he has looked for parallel. Treadwell is the author here, or the writer, or the person, for parallels in the late Roman iconography, where in some cases the arch serves as a symbol of the temple and is occasionally occupied by the menorah, while in other cases it is the sacrum covering the Holy Cross of Golgotha, and there was also in Jerusalem. Okay, moving forward. And these are, again, the mihrabs. You see the similar imagery within the walls in Jerusalem. Okay, let's scroll down further, see if I have any more some things to say about the actual developments. Similarly, in the Iraq country, or Basra or Kufa, we'll see the same coin imagery, right? Same scriptures, the Shahada being on the outside of the coin, and inside we'll see the name or the picture of the Amir, or the leader. And here you'll notice you'll see three people on the coin: the Amir, or the Khatib. This was where the actually Khatib came into place, who delivers a khutbah, or the sermon, right? And then the two people on the one on the left and one on the right of the actual Khatib, which is the backside of this coin, would mean the assistance of the actual person who delivers the sermon. So the fire altar with its two attendants was replaced by the praying figure, a Khatib, which is again the person who delivers a sermon, with an attendant on either side. And this is exactly what we just took a look at. So the Zoroastrian fire altar was changed or replaced by this image. Scroll down. So Treadwell has shown that the Zubayrid governor of Basra had presumably set a precedent with this gesture with his Marwanid successor, and then mimicked. He concludes that the Khatib was intended to be read as visual extension of the Shahada of the observe. So the praying Khatib and his audience, the two attendants, is the first early Islamic image on coins. So in the year 692-694, the Marwanid governor of Basra placed the Arabic phrase Muhammadur Rasulullah on his Sassanian style coins in the mints of Basra and Bishapur. His successor Hajjaj bin Yusuf continued to use Muhammadur Rasulullah, but added the Shahada on his coins. To sum up, Marwanids finally took over the essential symbols of Islam on coins, and the Zubayrid invocation of Muhammad as messenger of God, and the Arabic Shahada. And this is what we see here. Perfect. Now scroll down. So in 696, new dinars were produced. Same thing. We see the actual La ilaha illallah and Muhammadur Rasulullah. Additionally, we saw the actual Quran verses on the Quran, on the coins. So for instance, they bear the new religious symbols of Islam and its empire, the Shahada, encircled by the Quranic Risala, the prophetic mission of Muhammad, the shortened version of Quran, chapter 9, verse 33, on the opposite side of the Word of God, beginning of Surah Al-Ikhlas, which is Surah number 112 in the Quran. So you see in this coin here, the middle part is the Surah Ikhlas, which is the entire surah, short surah, Surah number 112, imprinted on the coin, and then the outer circle represents the Shahada. So the Hajjaj ibn Yusuf, the governor of the East, in 697 ordered the reforms of these dirhams, or these coins, within his realm. So as we move forward, so now we know that the coins are now being are containing the actual Quran surahs as well, in addition to the Shahada. And as we progress further, things change, and we finally get to a stage where the beginning, or right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, the actual Christian, or the dinar, the Roman currency, was still being utilized. It's only 40 or 50 years after the death of the Holy Prophet Muhammad is when we see the coin imagery being created within the realm of the Marwanids and the Zubayrids. So just a quick summary of this lecture before I end. Summary of the history of early Islamic coinage and the representation of empire and religion. So until the period of Zubayrid and Kharijite wars, almost no distinct imperial representation on coins can be discerned. So once again, 50 years after the death of the Prophet, there was no imagery on the coins itself. In fact, the same Byzantine coins were used, the dinars were used as mentioned in the Quran itself. Neither in the former Byzantine or Sassanid empires or territories, nor in the previously Germanic lands. In the early 7th century, in the Byzantine and the Sasanian empires alike, coin designs were conservative and standardized in order to serve primarily as marks of value. So, in summary, right, as we move forward, from about the late 650s until the uprising of Abdullah bin Zubair in the Second Civil War, minting was gradually regulated at the levels of provinces and districts. So the most serious political, military, and ideological challenge to the Umayyad regime was the Second Civil War, the Second Fitna, the Caliphate of Abdullah bin Zubair between 681 and then 692, an even more aggressive Kharijite movement between 687 and 697. So for the first time in 685, the Zubayrid governors, as a manifestation of the new Islamic imperial self-consciousness, put on coins the invocation of the messengership of Muhammad, Shahada, and then presumably in 689-90 extended it by profession of the unity of God. In 691, 692, one Zubayrid governor in the remote province of Sijistan even replaced the file altar of Zoroastrianism with these invocations in the Persian language and written in the Pahlavi script. These iconic written statements are indeed the first symbols of Islam and comparable to the cross, fire altar, and menorah. So, the summary, right, as we know after taking a look at this evidence, that the Islamic empire had finally found its distinctive symbolic form of representation, the bare iconic word of God. Surah 112, the Quran, representing the sovereignty of the new universal empire, along with the statement of Muhammad's prophetic mission in the Quran, from verse 9, chapter 9, verse 33, and the profession of faith, the Shahada, which symbolizes the new distinct religion. So hopefully we've seen the in-depth analysis of how the Shahada itself has been coined. So let's go back to the basic question, which was, how did Abraham took his Shahada? So back to our first slide, right? This was the first question. How did he take Shahada? So once again, the Quran says Abraham was neither a Jew nor a Christian or a Nazarene, to be more precise, but he was one inclining towards truth, a Muslim, submission. So he was a Muslim, which means to submit, the one who submits or submitting. And he was not one of the polytheists. So this Shahada that is taken today, which is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, which is there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God, we've seen through the historical evidence, through the coin imagery, that this term was coined 40 or 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad, during the reign of Muawiyah and then the Zubarids, within the second civil wars, or the second fitna. So in this lecture, I just wanted to detail out in depth, with evidence and the Quran itself, the concept and the stance of Shahada according to the Quran, and then how the Shahada came into being. So I hope this helps. Take a look at the concept based on the Quran itself and the Quran evidence. If you need to submit, you are a Muslim. And the way Abraham submitted, we also took a look at that. And likewise, Prophet Muhammad was instructed to follow Abraham, Millat Ibrahim, dictation of Abraham, and of course he did the same. And for us as Muslims, we are nothing but just submitters to one God. So I'd like to thank you for your time, and I look forward to seeing you in my next lecture.